first of all, I want to just say I absolutely love niches. It is so awesome. We are so lucky to have that here. Somebody asked me the other day, what's your favorite property? And it's like, well, I love Black Rock and I love Willard Leopold and I like Moyer Gould a lot and I love Wabash. But, there's really no favorite. They're all different. They all have something great to offer. So if you haven't been to them all, get to them all. They're awesome. And thanks to Julie and Gus and all the staff that keep niches running and put all these things together, and especially to keep the properties happening. And all the volunteers too. I don't know if any of you are volunteers, but people that help keep the properties, the invasive species out and fix them up and everything. It's just totally awesome. We're really lucky. I'm going to talk fast, which is not unusual for me, but they're on a short limit. So I'll try to get through this quickly. And if you have any questions later, feel free to ask. My name's Dan Annarino. I was born and raised around here. I spent most of my childhood, I hated being in the house. I was always out in the woods and playing out in the country. And it's just been part of my whole situation, Boy Scouts and things like that. So niches is perfect. And I've been an artist all my life. And I'm going to race through some of the things about how I work and so forth. I do tons of sketches. I feel kind of naked if I don't have a pen and a piece of paper on me. I just love doing little quick sketches and so forth, some more elaborate than others. I like doing watercolor studies. They're quicker, easier. Terry and I have done a lot of watercolor work out on Niches properties. But my primary thing is oil on canvas. And for those of you who are familiar or not, I use oil paints. Generally, I use Winsor Newton oils. I just like them a lot, but I use a lot of brush and I use a lot of palette knife, which those are in the middle there, kind of trowel it on and build up layers and so forth. Then I use a thing called Winsor Newton Liquid. It's a medium. You mix it with the paint and it thins it out and adds body to it. And it also, the nice thing about it, it dries quicker because oil will take a long time to dry. I can work on it, the piece the next day. So I really like liquid. Here's a shot of my studio, part of my studio where I work, my really fancy easel. It's 2 2x4s and a piece of plywood. In fact, I'm just in the process of moving my studio, which has been a real challenge, but anyway, so.
Quick question, Dan, can you just share the name of the mixing material that you mentioned just a minute ago? And just to let everyone know, you will receive a link to a recording of this presentation as well. So if you're trying to take notes, you'll get a copy of this.
Okay, and feel free to email me if you have questions or call me. I use Winsor Newton oils. There's all kinds of different oil paints. I just like the high quality of Winsor Newton. It's got a lot of color chroma. And I've locked into certain colors and so forth. And periodically I'll buy something new and try it out. But I use Winsor Newton oils and I use terpenoid. It's as a solvent to clean and whatnot. Terpenoid, it's an odorless turpentine. And then I use for a medium, there's different kinds of mediums. I love liquid, and a lot of people I've turned on to it love it too. I mix it with the paint on a piece of glass as I'm painting, and you can really thin it out so you can do like a thin layer to sort of see through it, or it adds some looseness to the paint. And the best thing about it is, generally speaking, the next day the painting is basically dry, so I can continue working on it rather than wait 3 days or whatever. Again, here's my studio. Then how I work, most 90-some% of my work is done in the studio. I work from sketches, watercolor studies, out of my head mostly, photographs, you name it. But I also do a little bit of plein air painting, although I'm not a plein air painter. There's so many good plein air painters, some of them in this room here. And plein air means it's a fancy name for painting outside. And the challenge of doing that is you have to drag your equipment out there. This is at Crow's Grove. and looking at the big pines. It was last spring. Terry was there, Rena Allen, Kurt Stanfield. We were all painting. It was a glorious day. And so you got to get all your equipment up. You have to deal with shadows and the light changing, bugs and all kinds of goofy things. But it's a lot of fun because the nice thing about it is you're seeing what's happening right there in front of your eyes. You're not looking at a photograph, which is kind of does some weird things to the image. And so I'd get the painting going, and then generally speaking, I'll take the painting I've done outside and then work it in the studio and tighten it up, fix it, and clean it up or destroy it, whatever the case may be. So that's at Crow's Grove. Then a lot of people seem to be interested in how you do a painting or how I do it. Generally speaking, I start with a tone canvas. Sometimes I use a white canvas, but mostly I use either a blue or a red canvas, and I've tried some other things, black and purple and whatnot. But for some reason, having a tone canvas, it just seems to help. And one thing that happens is that color that you've toned it with, many times that color will peek out through the painting when you're done. And so it kind of adds some color unity to it, unless you cover the whole thing, you know, and then you've kind of lost that. Then I'll take either acrylic or ink and draw in, block it in a little bit, get the basic composition or going or something. Then I dive right into the painting, and I'll work out, you know, just fat brush strokes, big solid areas, just to get things kind of started and get an idea of what's happening. Then next I'll start working on details, you know, picking areas and working with the light. And a lot of times suddenly during the painting, you know, you have to change something. It's like, well, this isn't working, or that shadow's lame or something. So, you know, it's an evolutionary process. There are painters I know that when they start a painting, they know exactly what it's going to look like when it's done. I'm not that way. There's a lot of accidents, and just the painting tends to evolve. And then here's the final painting. It's those of you familiar with Crow's Grove, it's the overlook from the little ledge there. And I love that spot. It's just really awesome. Anyway, moving on, here's another stages of a painting. Now here's something, and I'm working on some different abstracts right now like this. Gotta check the time. Okay. This is where what I do is I take a tone canvas. So I had a red canvas, painted it in acrylic underpainting. Then I take what are called oil sticks. They're these real fat, juicy, colored oil sticks. They're kind of like pastels, but they're oil-based. They're a real pain to work with. They're real messy and everything else. But then I draw on it and put all these marks on it. You can see a lot of this underneath here. And so the same day that I've done that, I've drawn on all these areas and had all these colors and everything. The same day, then I mix my oil paint, liquid, and a substance called cold wax. Comes in a jar. It's like a pasty wax. And I'll mix all those things together on my palette. And then I'll take the palette knife and really lay it on. So you can see where I've laid it on over top that oil stick. So this is all the same day. So now I've got this gooey oil stick underneath, and then this paint troweled onto the top. So this is the end of the first day. Everything's blocked in. This piece is, I think, 30 by 40 inches. Then the next day, I have to do it kind of the next day because it starts to set up a little bit, but it's not quite set. And then that oil stick underneath is still wet. So what I do is I take a palette knife and I just start scraping and scratching through it and taking a lot of the paint off. It's kind of a Zen thing. It's impermanence. And so I scratch a lot of the stuff off, leave some of it, reveal some of those colors underneath. And then in essence, then I start working on the painting, working out some of the details, the 10,000 strokes of the meadows and so forth. You can see again where in the trees, like that red is still peeking through, and it's throughout the painting, it sort of peeks through. And then here's the finished piece. So, you know, I got into more detail with the sky, building up the horizon and against the trees and some of the blues inside it, like you're going into those woods. And oops, sorry. What happened here? Okay. Which time I got? Okay. So that's how those pieces evolve. And then when do I know when to quit? I don't know. That's always a mystery to me when you've done enough. And that's at Fisher Oak Savannah. I'm really obsessed with niches and being outside in general. I love the idea that you can be deep into the woods, into this dense situation, but then you can also be where there's a meadow across the meadow and the tree line off in the distance. And I always think, you know, what's over in those trees over there? I'm going to go check it out. You know, who's hanging out over there? Is there some animals or whatever? These are 4 paintings that they're in a show right now at the museum, Lafayette Art Museum, Greater Lafayette Museum of Art. They're all 3 by 3 feet. These are all NICHES properties. This is at Wabash Bottoms. I was walking down there one night, late evening, and the sun was pouring through these trees, looking west. And I'm not sure what the flowers or plants are. Gus would know, or somebody would know, but I never know what this stuff is. But it was so awesome, and it was so peaceful. I was there by myself. Anyway, then here's another meadow scene, and I do a fair amount of these. I was a graphic designer in my day job for too many years, so I always like the graphic quality of these, you know, road, field, tree line, sky. And I do these things where I split the sky up sometimes because different time, or it makes it contemporary. And you might not be able to see it very well. Here I kept laying on paint, scraping it down, laying on paint, scraping it down, and just building up this and kind of having a good time, kind of like jazz. And that's at Moyer Gould, looking across the meadow there from the lane. And this is Wheeler Leopold. Of course, it could be anywhere, but I've been kind of into this whole thing where, again, talking about the different views, but what always strikes me is when you're, oh shoot, I'm almost out of time. When you're looking off the trail and there is so much going on, there's plants and flowers and insects and animals and everything. And it's just, it just blows me away. And so I've painted quite a few of those things and kind of get lost in it. It's, you know, just get lost into that world. And then the last one is, if I can scroll out, is down the trail. This is at Bachner Nature Preserve, just a trail, sort of a typical trail thing. And anyway, that's my story and I'm sticking to it. So if anybody has any questions, you feel free to ask me, or you can email me later if you know, or call. I've got a couple more. Again, the dense weeds and, or Gus yelled at me, it's not weeds, it's plants. You know, and the flowers and so forth. And then this is at Gladys and Alright Rock Creek Nature Preserve. And this one I got a lot looser and trying to get loosened up and be a little more abstract, which is where I'm headed now these days. Anyway, that's all. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you, Dan. We will have an opportunity for questions at the end too. So if you think of something you want to ask Dan later, you'll have an opportunity. So Terry, if you want to unmute yourself and share your screen and get ready.
Okay. All right, let me see if I can get everything up. Should be coming up. There. Can you see that?
Not yet.
Well, yeah, she said she can't see that. You can't see it now?
No, are you clicking the share screen first?
Well, let me go back just a second. Just a second. Okay. How's that?
All right, we can see that. Yep.
Okay. All right, I've just selected a few pieces of work, and I'll try to go into these in as much detail as possible. I've always been a graphic designer, an illustrator, and artist. I I studied at Heron School of Art, um, and I have always had a really strong interest in the natural world and in all forms of conservation in the natural world. I've spent a lot of time outdoors, a lot of time backpacking, camping. Um, so I think it's only natural that I'm combining my skills and my interest in the natural world. It's only natural that I ended up working on these, working at NICHES sites painting. And I feel the same way Dan does. I mean, we're really lucky to have NICHES sites close to us in this area. It's just really exciting. And in the last year, I've been working more closely with NICHES, which is really exciting, great experience. But anyway, this first watercolor is at Crow's Grove. Actually, Dan was down there with me, but I prefer, in terms of watercolor, I really prefer to work on site if I can. I sometimes, after I think I finish a painting and I take it back to the studio, I'll end up working on it more. May take a photograph to double check it when I'm working, but just being able to be on site, be sitting there and looking at something that's not a photograph, but the actual site and how the colors change, how the light change. That's the way I like to work if I can. And I have a watercolor backpack, excuse me, which I carry, watercolors and sometimes carry a lot of water and carry the brushes, everything I need. In this case, sometimes I forget too, but anyway, had a chair so that I could sit right down on the edge of the water and work. I've got a portable easel, which I often use, but if that doesn't work, sometimes I'll just have a piece of foam core board that I put on my lap. And I've had, experiences where it's so windy, I could never even come close to using an easel. And Alan can tell you about that sometime too, when we were out west and wind got so strong it tore the paper out of my hands while I was working. Anyway, so this is Crow's Grove, which I'd really like to go back there. I love that site. Be a nice place to actually go in fairly cool weather in the winter because it's so protected from the wind. I guess that you can see that. This is a site on the side of the hill at Moyer Gould Woods, and there's a photograph of me working. It was about a year ago, I think. Dan Annarino took that photograph, and you can see that little easel I have. In this case, also, I'm sitting on the bench at Moyer Gould. I mean, a lot of times that doesn't happen. I just sit on the ground or find a rock or whatever happens to be available. In this case, like this piece of Moyer Gould Woods is a piece where I use the process of wet and wet a fair amount, especially in these foreground areas where I drop in a lot of water, and then after the water dries to a certain point, I start adding some other colors, which then would flow into each other. Sometimes the process comes out, works is very effective, and sometimes you apply color, excuse me, apply paint when it's too dry or too wet, and then you lose it all. Let me go a little further here. This piece right here is Whistler Woods, which is at outside of Delphi. It's a fairly new site, and most of it is on the other side of the creek from where I'm painting. I think Dan was with me. We went down to this site also. But in the process of painting something like this, I usually draw it in very lightly with a pencil, like really lightly, and then go over it and drop in excuse me, then lay in some large areas of water again. And then within those large areas of water, I'll use a larger brush and start laying in some of the darker areas, and then gradually keep building it up. And I don't know if we saw any people at all that day or not, but man, it was just a fantastic day down at that site. It was downstream a little bit from the high bridge, and the water was just beautiful level. Let me see. This piece right here, maybe I should enlarge that just a little bit more. This piece on the right is on Wildcat at Clegg Gardens, looking downstream, pretty close to Peter Mill Bridge, not quite that far down, but looking downstream. This piece, I actually, in the lower part, you can see the use of more loose strokes and a more wet in wet approach, whereas in the upper, I kept working on it. I felt like I couldn't stop working on it. A lot of times I'm really concerned about trying to create a piece that has a looseness and a freshness and a light quality that I think is really effective. But sometimes I get overpowered by it and keep working on it and get it all overworked again. Let me show you. Here's a piece from Moyer Gould Woods. Yeah, Dan was with me again that day. This was on, I think, the last day of February a couple of years ago, like the very last day. And of course, the red-winged blackbirds had just come back. I'd spotted a couple days before that, and the spring peepers were singing, which was great. So it was really enjoyable. But I got involved in looking through all the foliage, and I started on this piece, and it's very unusual, but after I took it back to the studio, I probably worked on it, I don't know, several days, trying to deal with all this detail, trying to somehow figure out a way to present a view looking through the thick foliage and weeds and dried weeds that you so often see that seem to be almost impossible to deal with when I first approach it. Here's a piece from Holly Savannah, and over to the right is a photo, excuse me, of me working in the woods. I'm right on the edge of the woods. This was in July, and during the day, the clouds kept building up coming in from the right, and I stylized those somewhat. I think most of my work is a combination of trying to create a realistic view, but at the same time stylizing it in a way that I feel comfortable working, trying to always create a tension between those two different ways of seeing and working. And then, of course, in the front of this is the rattlesnake master, excuse me. And I've got another piece I'll show you in just a minute. We go a little bit further of the same view. Now, all the pieces I've shown you so far are watercolor, but one medium I work with a lot, and then I learned from Twin Rocker handmade paper, was the process of hand paper making, which is a wet process. And I also should say most all the watercolor paper I use is Twin Rocker handmade paper. And if you're not aware of it, Twin Rocker is one of the only hand paper mills, commercial hand paper mills in the country, and they're located in Brookston. So here I am. Like I said, handmade paper is a very liquid process. In this photograph, you can see I'm pouring a mixture of cotton pulp and water into what I call a decal box. And there's a ridge cut out of the inside of this box, and in the box is a sheet of plexiglass, which I slide in and out. Anyway, after I pour all the pulp in, and I pull the sheet of plexiglass out very quickly, and the pulp will then in this photo, that's this photo, the pulp then falls upon this mold. A mold is basically a frame with a screen on it. In this case, the screen is a very fine knit brass screen. And the water naturally then drains through that decal box. I've just got it sitting on a couple sawhorses. The water drains through, and the surface tension basically will hold all the pulp on when you tip up the mold. But anyway, so I take the mold, and I've already done it here in this photo. Take the mold and transfer it down, and then of course push on it with my hands and transfer all of that pulp to a wool felt. And then after that point, I start working with squirt bottles, like restaurant squirt bottles with color, excuse me, and blocking areas out with plastic and mylar materials. Before I start on a paper piece, I do a lot of sketches, and I'm just showing you a couple pages here from my sketchbook, but I may do, I don't know, any number, 10, 20 sketches of the same piece over a period of weeks before I even start working. And I often also do them in color, or sometimes if I don't have my sketchbook with me, I'll, do one on an envelope or anything I can find as I develop my ideas. So, in the sketchbook, this sketchbook I can fit in my pocket, so forth. But I think the idea of developing ideas and then having those ideas to go back and think about and go over and see what the possibilities are for manipulating them is, you don't want to lose those ideas. I've stopped along the road and made sketches of clouds before. It's just an invaluable resource. And I think Dan had photos of his that he showed you. Now here's a paper piece. Wait, I don't know if that's too big on there or not. I can make it a little smaller. Here's a paper piece inspired by Holly Savannah. You notice I had the Holly Savannah watercolor before that. Now, the one thing I like about working with the paper pulp is that it's wet medium. So while it's still wet, I can manipulate all of the edges in a way that I think emphasizes the qualities that I'm trying to bring out in the piece. Like for instance here, outline pulling the pulp away so that the clouds define the outer edges of the piece, or the bottom somehow relating to the surface of the plants and soil, texture of plants and the surface of the soil. And also in the long run, my background as a graphic designer is what really inspires, or I shouldn't say inspires, it's like a matrix in my mind of how I want to simplify these shapes and make them as powerful as I can without focusing too much on detail. And this last piece, I've got a detail of it here, but anyway, this last piece was really inspired by Moyer Gould. No, I'm sorry, God, not Moyer Gould, but the Fisher Oak Savannah. This would be a view out toward the road looking back in. And again, I was really fascinated by what's going on in all these dense weeds and all this material. And this one, I added like a almost fantasy aspect of it, of some things that I could see and some things that I couldn't see and some things that I imagined, and trying to bring all those together to create an exciting composition. There's a detail from in here. And again, on this piece, you can see what I've done with the clouds so that they help define the edges of the piece. And I enjoy working with handmade paper. I've been doing it for, I don't know, I think like 40 years, something like that. And I had to learn how to control it and to be able to create images and to be able to know what handmade paper works best to create. I mean, not trying to do the same thing that would work just as well in some other medium, but you have to think of the handmade paper as the medium in the same sense that you would think of oil paint as a medium or pastel or watercolor as a medium. How am I doing time-wise?
You are just about on the button right
Oh.
there with 15 minutes. So
All
does
right.
anyone have any questions for Terry as Terry stops sharing his screen so that Rena can get her presentation prepped? All right. So next up, Rena Brower will be presenting.
Share screen.
Hi,
Hello.
you hear me?
Can hear you. There we go.
All right.
All right. Take it away, Rena.
As typical, Rena's had technical difficulties all day. So here I sit at NICHES with Alan. And thank you, Alan, for helping me.
Her assistant.
He's my assistant, yes. Instead of going through technique and stuff, everybody's pretty much aware that I'm a wet into wet kind of painter with watercolor. Thought I'd just kind of go through my creative process and how the properties have really inspired me to paint the subject matters that I do. So starting off, I do go out. I love the plein air painting. A lot of it's social. You heard I was with the guys. It was really wonderful to be out there and paint with people that you enjoy and are so creative. But when I plein air paint, I usually do depict the subject as I see it. And this is just for me to think about how it goes together so that when I go back to the studio or I decide to just kind of do a painting that inspires me in my own voice, if you will, then I know what elements I might leave for the viewer to identify to maybe know the direction that I'm going. Something I'm never sure about, but it's what I do. So let's say I do trees. I love trees. So is a tree, as I observe it, the one on the right was actually a sycamore tree. The one on the left was just a foggy, misty morning. But the trees are just a shape, a form of identity of something that we see in our world and how we view it. And I love being an artist so that I can take that and just be extremely expressive as the one on the right that gives a sense of color, a burst, maybe sunrise or sunset. I like for maybe the viewer to think about, well, what is going on there? This is a little close up, but it's a larger painting. But when you first look at it, with nature and trees and everything, nature oftentimes kind of tucks something within it. I love the sense of when you're out in nature, maybe I don't see everything. I might have to stop and pause, especially something that is living among all of the foliage or the trees. So a lot of my work kind of depends on, well, maybe it's something that is tucked among this subject matter that I'm depicting. Again, another sycamore. Oftentimes these are from walks. I find that if I'm on site, the opposite of Terry, I have a tendency to do too much. But if I'm in the studio, then I am more direct and paint freely. A sense of color is a very important part of when I depict a subject matter. The one on the right was, I wish I had the beginning. It was extremely abstract. You could not even tell what it was. And I do this a lot. I'll do design painting, if you will. I do a sense of place. It's not anything depicted, but it is colors, shapes, or forms that I've taken from compositions that I kind of sense among the landscape. The one on the right is actually black rock. it's a lot of climbing around out there. And I felt like an elongated format would maybe depict that there is places that you go up in this area, and it has a lot of rocky ledges. Along with trees, the size, the sense of presence. Oh, if you've ever been out to Moyer Gold is in Carroll County, this is the first thing I came upon when I first visited the property before it was actually open to the public. And it's this oak tree. You'll find that every single branch matches exactly the branches that are there. But it's just kind of a sense of place. There was a slightly beaten path along the side of it that just led down to the creek. And it was like, you kind of know there's something beyond there, but this whole presence of this tree just stops you in, you have to stop and look. NICHES has so many pathways, and you can just walk on so many different properties, and you just kind of get this sense of here you are. As you walk by, there might be a hint of color back there. You don't maybe know what to identify it as. And so as I paint, it's kind of a narrative for me as what I am, how I verbally in my mind, if that's possible, describe to myself what that sense of place, what that day was like. And this is one of those, and this is out of my head. I love the solitary kind of depiction of a tree. And again, we've got a dying tree here. Alan's helping me. Yeah. Color is really a huge element that I'm really drawn to. Oftentimes I will search for something as I'm out on a walk for something specific. And of course, this is flowers. But you know, they just seem like they were just reaching up from the ground when so many of the wildflowers are actually close to the ground. And it seemed like they were just set behind, in front of a sea of blue. And it just seems so dramatic to me. And again, it's that whole sense of place. And with the flowers, you know, there's other elements. I've been out there on a windy day. And oftentimes there's such a movement. So I think about that movement. How can I create movement in a painting, which is actually wet into wet with this one, and actually have kind of in focus, but not truly describing the subject matter, which was probably violets I had seen.
Sorry.
Uh-oh, technical difficulties. I love how if I squint, I can look out over a sea of flowers, of wildflowers there in the forest. And I can see areas of white and darks. And I think about those patterns that I see. I take those back with me to my studio once again. And I use semi of the shape of what I had witnessed out there. And I might use the composition that I had actually seen somewhere within the woods. And I do also oftentimes do sketches, very quick ones. Oh gosh, these flowers. Okay, they are called, wait a minute, I know what they are. They are called spiderwort. Aha, yes. These were absolutely stunning at Frog's Glory. You know, people are a real big connection to me. And Frog's Glory was actually owned by Margaret Marchand, and she was a fellow artist friend of mine. And I remember going out there and the love that she had for this property. Well, you know, she did turn it over to NICHES so that we all could enjoy it. But I tell you, you should look this up. And on Facebook, oftentimes there's wonderful people that will post what is blooming on certain properties. And you can kind of stay on top of that, because some of these little native flowers don't last very long, but I think this one lasts a few months in the summertime. But through that, walking through the pathways that they had there, there was this constant hum, and the bees just love this plant. Okay. Birds have been a really big thing for me. I've painted birds for many, many years. I love who resides within the nature. Herons, what typically happens is I might take a subject, and I took the subject of herons for a good year. And I think about, how can I depict this subject? And oftentimes these are examples of some backgrounds that I've used. I play back and forth with, I love the line and the shape of this bird. And I also think about, sometimes I just want it to be the focal point, or do I want it to be a part of the its surroundings? All of it comes back to that narrative of how I want to describe the subject. And I'm hoping that I can use that to transfer it to the viewer as you look at it. Birds in flight, sometimes they don't even need to have a background. The shape of them is just so beautiful. It's like, why would I want anything else in there? And you'll find that as you look at some of these, some of the colors are more vibrant. Maybe perhaps you can see that on your screen, and others not. I do use different surfaces in order to achieve this. Yeah, also, if I want more vivid colors, I will go to a more staining ink kind of a color and add to that. But whether it is defined or soft, it's just, there's something about, I'm like, I wonder what that bird, it just seems like it's thinking, probably, can I get a fish? I don't know. But I think, what if I could depict a persona? So again, I love the flight. We have eagles on the creek. I live on the Wildcat Creek. I see them all the time. And so I'm able to actually get a closer look at them. The one on the left was pretty much painted all at once. I don't know, maybe 45 minutes. And the one on the right, I painted it. I probably made supper. I came back, I painted it. So there's a difference in how I address my subject, whether it is immediate or whether I'm just kind of taking my time going back and forth. These birds give me such joy because I hear their song often before I even see them. This is actually a depiction, kind of the same format, if you will, but I decided to try to do a square on one side and making the bird more abstract, as opposed to the one on the left where it is elongated. I love the cattails. And how, and the red's important. Where am I going to place the red of that wing in the whole composition? So it's interesting that nature gives you subjects that you can kind of determine whether you're going to use the body or a portion of that to depict. Another red-winged blackbird on the left, I had used some gouache. The wrens, they're just such characters. I use those oftentimes because they always create new places that I find them. Hummingbirds, a favorite for me. I got flowers and birds together. I couldn't ask for anything more. Owls had been a really big subject for me. I think I did them for more than 2 years, and it's really interesting how your work can sometimes connect you to other people you'd never would have imagined. I actually, during the time I was painting owls, I was contacted by Native Americans and talking about the importance of the owl and their culture, and also by a scientist from NASA that also was talking about the owl. They weren't talking about my art, they were just talking about the owls. But I must say they really liked the way I depicted the different pieces. So I love little critters. Squirrels are my all-time favorites, although some can get rather annoying. Oops, there we go.
Didn't mean to do that.
That's okay. I like the composition of the ground and folding the subject into it and how it is one with its surroundings. It's called survival, I believe. If you look under your feet, you'll oftentimes see other wonderful little treasures, some that can be quite distracting, and those have painted with me know what I'm talking about. I live on the Wildcat, and I have a couple properties that are near me from NICHES. If you ever have a chance, canoeing is a wonderful way to view nature. The one on the left is actually two paintings put together. And again, the one on the right is actually a sketch I did. It was just probably a 15-minute sketch. I love the sound. Sound is very important in my paintings, not only birds, but water is very soothing. And so I actually have tapes of water that I play in my studio. So at the end of the year, I do this, I've done this for years. These are actually my Christmas cards. But at the end of the year, I really sit down for like 2 or 3 days. I paint 75 or more plus cards. And they're actually reflecting on what I had seen that year or something, composition. This has kind of been the year of the trees. I did a lot of trees. I love the gullies. And so this is really quick. These are probably like less than 10 minutes each. And a big thank you to Gus and to Julie and to all the other staff members and all those that have volunteered and support NICHES. You really give a great, tremendous gift to so many of us that you don't have any idea how much it gives inspiration. I want to say one last thing. Since 2006, I've been involved with NICHES, and before these 3 guys, thanks guys, I was involved with Joe Peters, singer-songwriter. And I tell you, I really look forward to what Alan has to announce, because I love being out there working with everyone. And thank you guys so much. Did I go okay?
All right. Thank you, Rena. All right. All right, Alan, you've got this, so I'm just gonna let you take it away. All right, thanks.
Let's see if I can get this. Okay. Where's my slideshow? Okay. Well, thank you. It's not showing up. There it is. A little delayed. Thank you. My name's Alan McConnell. I am a large format photographer. I've been photographing since high school and dabbled with that for many years. I was also a science teacher for 38 years at the public schools. And so for me, photography is a really nice blend of art and science together. I find myself attracted to nature quite a bit. In fact, with all of us, I think we're all inspired by nature by a variety of ways. What moves me most is both the light and sounds that I encounter during my hikes and stuff. And so I'd like to, with that in mind, I'd like to start off with a little short 2-minute video that I did with just recording sounds. So please enjoy it. recorded from various NICHES properties. From one of my favorites, Fisher Oak Savannah.
Hey, David. Can we watch now?
Let's go one more to go. If you want to watch it, but
What happened?
I'm watching one more. This is the last one, I think.
I love the sounds that would drive my attention to the things I like to photograph. This second video is more of my technique that helps me to be inspired. Helps explain the large format camera and the actual positive uses of it. During one of my projects, I created Misty Morning on the Prairie. It started with a beautiful August morning at Fisher Oak Savannah Nature Preserve. A nice fog muted the scene while looking straight at the sunrise. Birds and insects created the only detectable sounds, other than my boots moving through the prairie grasses. I found this location the week prior and experimented with various compositions. I knew I wanted to return when the conditions would be more suitable for what I visualized with my final image. My eyes were drawn to three elements in the composition. The first, a strong foreground with the bright yellow coneflowers. Secondly, looking directly into the sun, I could see the diffused halo caused by the fog. And finally, connecting the two other elements, the great biodiversity of the vast field that was laid out before me. Out in nature, our eyes are capable of focusing on each of these elements one at a time. But with a typical photograph, those strong elements are minimized or lost. This is why I use the large format camera. Due to the available movements, appropriate filtration, and the information gathered by a large piece of film, I hope to produce the image that I originally envisioned. For the first element, you need to understand that the image on the back of the view camera is upside down and backward. Julie, are you seeing this?
So I'm not actually seeing the video. I'm seeing the final piece. I guess I didn't realize you were trying to actually show a video and not a voiceover. So
Yeah.
you want to try that again from another?
Well, I'm not sure what's going on here. That worked the other day. It says sharing is paused. Okay.
Yeah, all we can see is the exploring sights and sounds image.
Mhm.
Well, I apologize for this technical difficulty.
Is it on a different screen if you need to stop sharing this one and share?
Yeah, I will.
Stop share and then
I can't even get to the stop sharing. Okay, where it is. Okay. Let me try that again.
So do you have the video open in the background?
Yes, I do.
Okay, so if you click this share screen again, and then click on the video. There you go.
This is
Okay.
why
Is it
I
showing?
use the large format camera.
Sorry about that.
Due to the available movements, appropriate filtration, and the information gathered by a large piece of film, I hope to produce the image that I originally envisioned. For the first element, you need to understand that the image on the back of the view camera is upside down and backwards. By using rear tilt, I was able to change the perspective of the foreground, the first element, making it larger as if we were looking specifically at the flowers. Two techniques were needed for the second element. Using what is called fall, I lowered the front lens, decreasing the amount of sky. To decrease the brightness of the sky, I applied a graduated neutral density filter to balance the light of the sky with the darker land. Finally, applying slight front tilt, I altered the plane of focus to be sure the third element was sharp throughout the scene. At this point, I inserted the film holder, took a meter reading, and tripped the shutter. And then it was time to work in the lab. Once the film was developed, I was ready to prepare for the meticulous wet mount scan. This sharp, high-resolution scan allows me to apply precise photo edits before the final print. Using a mask, shown in red, I could apply contrast controls to the three specific elements. First, the strong foreground with the yellow coneflowers. Second, the halo around the morning sun. And finally, the third element, the vast field of wildflowers. With my guide file complete, I created my master file with nearly 600 megabytes of information, basically making my camera a 100 megapixel camera. After the print is made on beautiful Honolulu photorag paper, proper presentation is desired. Double matting using thick 6-ply acid-free materials enhances the richness of the piece. Stop by the Opera House Gallery in Delphi, Indiana to see this and many other images, or visit my website at www.alanmcconnellphotography.com. And thank you for supporting the arts.
And this is Rena and I's gallery along with Deb. So hope you come stop in someday. Let me stop this. And our partner, Deb. Okay. And I like to just share some of my thoughts that went into, not Rena's, into some of my photography here. Can everybody see this okay?
Yes, we're back at the first image again. Yeah.
Okay. So recording sounds that you saw in a previous one. And at this time, just some thoughts here. Like, for example, Black Rock, the springtime Black Rock, and this special occasion when you had those dogwoods coming out. Or a strong bounce light at Crow's Grove. You see up underneath the cliff there. Same location, but then the diffused light that you get from a beautiful foggy morning. I tried to record the sound of this barred owl. I was standing right there, and all of a sudden this barred owl started hooting. I mean, he was close to me. It was startling, but fun. Summer reflections along Little Pine Creek, or the autumn colors of Clegg. And then a favorite oak of many. Everybody knows this tree at Mario Gold. Always time I see it, I try to imagine a kid looking at this, and that kid's going, treehouse. And then same property, but in the wintertime. This one is a work in progress. This is one I took, I gotta do it again. I hope to get another snow, but not so many footprints. I wanted like a single trail of prints to go with it. I like the light though. And then this one is from the Wabash Bottoms, where I set up to get this one. Symbolism is important to me. Composition of a rock, an oak, a couple of hickories. Searching for small, intimate landscapes. And then searching for small curiosities, little droplets of dew and light coming off of it. Or a wood sour. Or a brand new oak tree. You don't typically think of the bright colors only till in the fall, but that's brand new and had wonderful red colors to it. Spider web. And then I enjoyed kind of scouting out. I haven't really gotten a good photograph of this place. This is down there in Fountain County, Whistler Hare Woods. Really neat cliffs and stuff, but I really like this area being so open in the wintertime. And then trying to find different angles to approach something like the spider web or shapes, another oak and Fisher Savannah, or trying to capture a certain mood, as in this one. And then the splendid chaos of biodiversity. It's just full of life there. I think Terry had a painting the same spot, those trees. Then I had an exciting time. I was, and it was also quite interesting when they invited me to observe and record a prescribed burn. It was interesting to witness the NICHES organization in action. So I'm thinking here, this Bob, he's pointing out, giving everybody directions. Either that or he's saying, now guys, if this gets out of control, go that way. But it did really produce some really interesting, unique lighting with the burn and the smoke and the light coming through it. It's amazing how quickly that went over the ground. And a chance to meet and converse with some of the volunteers. As previously mentioned, the four of us began this project, we call it our NICHES project, in 2018 and 2019. And it continues to be a good project for us because, as you can see, there's so many different properties to visit and times and so on and so forth. And then this past year, 2020, we invited 4 other artists to join us. And one of them was Kurt Stanfield. He did oils, as well as Leslie Halflich out of Noblesville, wasn't it? Yeah. And Rodney Reveal also had some beautiful oils. It seemed like we all kind of got drawn to that one spot there in Crow's Grove. Then our partner, Deb, she did some jewelry that was inspired by nature. Yeah, cloisonné. And then we hope to inspire many others to join us this next year as well, as we continue our shows at the Opera House. Anyway, that's it. And I'd like to end this with a big thank you to the entire staff at NICHES. They provided us with an opportunity to show our work, and we enjoyed just giving us a good excuse to get out in nature. Don't need an excuse, but it's fun listening to these different people to explain all what they're doing and everything. So anyway, I'll turn this back over to Julie. And
well, thank you all for sharing tonight. Alan, if you want to go ahead and put that slide back up about the juried exhibition.
Okay.
You can share a little bit more about that as we're answering questions. Any final questions from anybody? At this point, if you want to unmute yourself to ask the question, you're welcome to do so. And as I mentioned, I will be sending out a recording. Yep, go ahead. Go ahead, Pam.
Hi, thanks everyone. That is so, thank you. Can you hear me?
We can hear you, yep.
It was fascinating and wonderful sharing of your processes and beautiful artwork. Quick question on my part is, I find it really difficult to be random. You know, when we see the chaos in nature, and if it's a painting or a drawing or something of that sort, do you have a technique? Does anyone have a technique for really trying to be able to be very random in the chaos of nature?
I'll jump in. Yeah, it is kind of crazy because sometimes you kind of get sucked into, you want to organize it and fix it or something. And as a graphic designer, it's easy to try to line things up and get everything organized because that's what you do in graphic design. But and the recent work I've done, I try to participate in that chaos, and to me it's such a paradox because it's complete chaos and randomness and everything, yet it's working, it's all in harmony, you know, everything's working together, and I'm really intrigued by that. And anyway, I'll let somebody else share.
Yes. Can you hear me?
yep.
You
Yep.
can?
Yes.
Yeah, but I mean, you know, whether it's, all art is a matter of selection. I mean, we're selecting images and modifying those images to create our compositions. So we're not limited to something that we don't like that happened to be in the way. We're modifying that. I mean, very few of the pieces of artwork that anybody saw looked exactly that way on site.
Right.
Sure. But I may be, my question might be even more basic in terms of just being able to do the strokes or whatever randomly. I find myself, you know, seeing a pattern that just keeps duplicating itself. Does that make sense?
Hard to be random.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, most serious artists, are you talking, Dan?
No, go ahead.
No, I mean, most serious artists, you know, sometimes do the same thing over and over and over. And like I mentioned and Dan mentioned, might do a huge number of sketches. And then maybe, you know, the painting that you do is a result of several years of modifying and adjusting and planning and thinking and seeing. So it does show some form of consistency, but in order to get to that, it takes a long time. And you know, I mean, one way to define an artist is that someone that's a serious artist is someone that keeps working all the time and they keep growing in their work. Someone that does it once in a while is starting over all the time.
May I jump in a second?
Mm-hmm.
My COVID project has been every day I sit down and I do a painting in less than 10 minutes, beginning to end. And that repetition of quickness and spontaneity has really translated into being looser and freer and just letting things happen. So maybe that might be helpful if you set a timer and just do quick things once a day.
And,
Yeah.
and there are
That's a
lots
good
of
idea.
there are lots of things you can do to sort of break out of a rut or break your pattern. And I'm constantly doing that where especially I work on a series for a long while, like the work I'm doing now looks nothing basically like the work that I showed tonight. But you can do different things, work faster, work on a limited palette, different sizes, small versus large, different media, obviously, because that can really jumpstart you into going to a different direction.
I really like to work with composition first. So a sketchbook and a pencil. And I just go out, and if I can do away with all of the detail and see if the large shape creates a pleasing composition to your eye. And then from there, I'll do just patterns of color within those little designs that I've made. I'm not really painting anything. I find for me, I need to compose and get a good composition before I proceed, because otherwise I'm just painting a thing. I don't know if that makes any sense, but I just use a small, just a small notebook, and I take those little carry along watercolors and even a water bottle with water in it, and away I go. But I just keep it really simplified so that I can see the design or the essence of what I want to convey. So I don't know. I love contour line.
Thank you.
Favorites.
Carrie,
Yeah.
I have a question.
Thanks very much.
Mhm.
I had a question for Terry. The water sheen, what's your technique for that? I mean, the water looks extremely wet and shiny.
The what? Say that again. From what?
Your water, the sheen on the water, and the one,
In the watercolor?
yes.
Okay,
How
like the one from Clegg.
Yeah,
Yes, I believe so.
I think that was what it was on.
And what was the question exactly? How do I make it shiny?
Yeah, how do
Yeah.
you make it look so reflective and shiny?
Yeah, shiny, the sheen on the color.
Well, gee, a lot of practice. Also, a lot of times you're contrasting and comparing in order to make a highlight work real well. The area around it has to be darker naturally. So sometimes you make certain areas darker than they are in reality, and in order to punch out certain parts of it. I've worked on certain things where the shadows aren't strong enough, but if I punch them out and punch out the highlights brighter, it seems to be really come to life more. I don't know if I'm answering that, but you got to play around a lot to create like qualities of water. Man, I've done that so many times to get something to come out. And a lot of times you see artists work in books or in a show. Well, those are the best pieces they've done. And they may have done the same thing 10 times and it just didn't work before. You just got to keep doing it.
One thing about water too, which it's pretty tricky, and you really need to just sit there and look at it. Look at
Right.
sit there by a creek or whatever to really see what's going on. And it is pretty darn complicated because you have the shadows that are reflected, the sky, the values of darks and lights, the crisp reflections, the deep dark shadows, sometimes
Right.
the rocks underneath. And, a lot of the times too, it's the contrast, I think.
Right. Well, yeah, I mean, I've stood in the water a lot in creeks and lakes and just stand there on a sunny day and move my hands and see what the light refractions do as they go across the bottom. And also, like Dan, I think that's what you meant. You can focus on the bottom and then refocus your eyes on the top, on the reflections on the top. I mean, all those things are going on at the same time.
Yeah, it's complicated.
Yeah, it is.
Looks beautiful.
Good. Thanks.
One thing I want to throw in, I kind of wanted to share. It is so interesting that, like the four of us, a lot of times we've painted some of the same scenes, but, our interpretations are so different. And some of it has to do with the media, whether it's a photograph or watercolor or oils and things. But, and I think that's one thing I think Rena might have said, I'm not exactly one to go out and exactly paint what I see. It's more what I'm getting out of the scene, and or what's really attracting me to what's happening. And is it the color, is it the darks and lights, or the shapes and the graphic qualities and so forth. And we have these things that are called niche shows, but probably 3/4 of like my paintings, it really could be any woods anywhere, or something. But anyway.
Another thing too, in creating a piece, the idea of doing a series of quick sketches, I think is really a good idea, because it forces you to itemize the individual large shapes that are the dominant parts of the composition. And I do a lot of sketches. The only problem, I've talked to Dan about this, the only problem is I'll do a sketch 3 by 4 inches. And then when I want to do it full size, when it's 30 by 40 or something, I have a huge empty space in 2 or 3 spots, and I'm trying to figure out how to deal with those. What do you think, Dan?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it's just the work you got to put into it and doing it over and over, and trying different things, because you do become that's why I tend to run sometimes with a series, because then I start to become familiar with things and I don't have to think about it too much, because
that's what I do. I mean, I'll do a whole series of pieces on the same subject, the same format. Did a whole series of triangular handmade paper pieces. I don't know how many I did, trying to, then you go back and select a few of those you think are good enough.
I have a question. Do you all find that you have favored seasons or times of the year to get out and capture the images?
And when it's warm.
Well, the word probably, for me, sometimes you have to be selective to what your subject matter is, but deep into the summer, it gets to be kind of a drag because it's just green, which is a lot of painters. It's the big dilemma. How do you deal with the endless green, And so you either have to look at a different view or something, or that's why as the summer, the colors start shifting to a little more reds and so forth, or the spring you can see more, and I don't know.
Myself, it depends on the property. Like some of the finest ones I found at Fisher Oak, Savannah, was right there in August. But in Black Rock, you wait till the summertime, then everything is just too solid. You can't see much. So early in the spring is a nicer time for me on that. So it really depends for me on the specific property you want to investigate.
I've also, sometimes I work in the car when it's cold out, because it's, the images may really be dramatic in the winter, and that's the only time they're like that. Got to work in the car. I remember one time stopping along the road to work, and every other car stopped and asked me if I needed help. So I'm not going to do it on the edge of a road anymore.
One time we were in the Southwest, and Terry was trying to paint early in the morning. And he's trying to paint. He's going, "What is going on here?" And well, his watercolors were freezing. Didn't work too well then.
That's true. That's true. Yeah. Another time, just a couple of years ago, out in Capitol Reef National Park, I was close enough to the road. Some guy stopped and said, "Can I take a picture of you while you're painting?" He said, "I saw a woman in my Wyoming painting, but I missed her."
I did a painting once along the Missouri River, and I took a break, and then I came back and I was looking at it from about 10 feet away, and it's like, I didn't paint all those birds in the sky. And then I got up closer, and it was a whole bunch of gnats stuck to the oil paint.
One question I had for all three of you: do you totally depend on your photographic memory to get the color that you saw, or is that interpretation? Rena, your colors are so brilliant, and that's why I was wondering if you when you're doing your sketches, do you note a color or, oh, I might do it in this color or that?
I should have brought a sketchbook. Sometimes I note, I might see a color, but I'll say, oh, I really want to punch this up and make it more dramatic. It's almost like writing an outline. A little known fact is I had wanted to be a writer, and I was told I had to choose between writer or painter. So I decided I would try to make my paintings my written word. So I don't know if that's a weird thing or what, but I try to make that a part of the narrative that I'm trying to express. And when I showed you some of those paintings, some were really soft. I have to tell you, as a woman, mood really plays into a lot of my work. So, and I find that the medium
Hey,
water.
that's sexist.
But but I really find that watercolor has been the most versatile for me for expressing. I do other medias, but I don't enjoy them as much. Probably don't know how to work them like you guys.
Also, a lot of times I may almost finish a piece, and then there've been several times when I do the sky after I get back to the studio, so I can hold the paper and move it around and get the wet qualities I'm searching for the clouds.
And obviously another thing that comes into play is the media. I mean, the watercolor is more immediate. You can't technically mess around with it a whole lot. Oil paint, you cover it up. If you work in a brush or versus like there's another artist here that uses heavy palette knife, really laying it on with a palette knife thick. And even like Alan, I mean, he's just not going out and taking a snapshot and that's it. You know, he's thinking about the process, changing that camera lens around, then going to the studio, and it evolves. And, you know, there's a whole bunch of layers, and Terry's paper pulp paintings are a completely different format for working, and different things, different accidents, plus getting to know your materials and how they operate. Then you become familiar with it. You don't have to think about it as much.
Yeah, that's why you need to do it all the time, or otherwise you're always starting over if you wait large periods of time between doing pieces.
There's a quote I always liked, and I can't remember who said it, Diebenkorn or somebody. Many people with talent are left behind by people who are willing to work, and that's half the ball game. Just plug it in.
Can I ask you, Mickey, is there a medium that you use specifically?
Well, I quit painting for a long while, and I just decided I like watercolor. And I've done a few things, but not a lot. That's why during COVID, I thought, I'm going to start doing this again.
Yeah, you're here.
That's my motivator.
Hey, the trails are open. They're a beautiful place to get inspired.
Oh, yeah. I'm busy removing invasive species and planting trees.
Oh, thank you. Thanks.
Terry, I have a question about your paper process.
Yes.
How long does it take you to, I guess, from start to finish with the pulp and the screens? How long does it take you to actually create a piece?
Yeah, well, quite a few of them take me several days. You know, I mean, that's excluding all the sketches that I've been making and, you know, trying to decide what to do. But yeah, I'll start off and make a base sheet, and then I start building the color on that base sheet. And I might block out a large area and do a sky and work on a sky. I don't know, one afternoon, and then I'll work on it more the next day, and then I'll block out part of it. And sometimes it takes me 3 or 4 days on some of the pieces.
Mm-hmm.
It takes quite a while. And then there's a lot of drying time. And then sometimes I emboss small, sometimes little buildings or streams or whatever. And then when it's completely dry, then I'll color those in by hand, or maybe touch up some parts of it. So it can take a long time.
By embossing? What do you mean by embossing?
Well, when I finish with the piece, I have to press it in a press. I have a paper making press with a 20-ton jack. So I press it to overload capacity over 40,000 pounds to get the water out. Well, you know, it's pressed between well, it's got wool felts on it, but it's pressed between boards. But then right before I press it, I may lay, you know, like some string, or I cut little building shapes out of mat board and lay them in place. Then I put them in the press and press it. And I may leave the mat board in until it's halfway dry so it retains its shape better. Is that clear?
Yeah, for sure. Thank you.
Sure.
All right, any other questions?
Now, just a huge thank you to Rena and Terry and Alan and Dan. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Thanks for
Thank you.
coming.
Yes, and thank you everyone else for joining us tonight. We
Yes.
have more Zoom presentations coming your way, at least one a month. So check out our calendar for upcoming sessions.
Thanks, Julie.
All right, thank
Thanks for
you.
attending, everybody.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Go out to NICHES tomorrow.
Bye.